Okay, so X-Men Apocalypse is the third movie to come out in terms of the new generation of X-Men films. You started with X-Men First Class, then you had X-Men Days of Future Past, which was amazing, and now you've got this third X-Men film, X-Men Apocalypse. And Bryan Singer has come back for this film. He's the guy who did the original X-Men films. Most of them were good. I know universally X-Men 1 and X-Men 2 are rated fairly high, and X-Men 3 is rated fairly low. He also did that horrible Wolverine Origins movie, so not everyone's perfect, and now he's come up with X-Men Apocalypse. So I'm interested to see whether he's able to repeat the glory of the first two movies, or whether he does another dump like X-Men Wolverines. Okay, so leading up to this movie, there's been a lot of buzz, particularly around things like Apocalypse's outfit. I know a lot of people are upset with his outfit because when you compare it to the comics, it kind of looks a bit weird. It looks like he's got plumbing wrapped all over him. Apparently, he looks very purpley pink, where he's supposed to be just blue and grey. So that's been very issues of the comic purists, not really issues of a bad movie. Other issues brought up in the trailers have been things like Jennifer Lawrence looks like she's mailing it in. She's expressionless in the trailers. One more concern that some people talked about, but not very often, was that this movie was definitely going to have a lack of Patrick Stewart, or a lack of Professor X rather, in this film, and a lack of Jean Grey, the older Jean Grey, and a lack of the older Magneto. So the old characters are now gone. We've handed over to the new crew, and we want to know whether that's actually going to work. So the movie's now been out for a couple of weeks in America and in Australia, and Rotten Tomatoes at the moment, I think they're sitting about 52 to 55%, which, if for a critic rating, which isn't actually particularly good. And apparently the audience rating is about the same, sort of mid-range, which isn't particularly good, particularly for a superhero film, which usually needs to score above this sort of 80% in order to be considered a really good superhero film. We know too that the opening weekend in the US, which is a big indicator of how popular the film is, scored around the $80 million mark. Now for a normal movie, $80 million is a spectacular mark to hit for any movie coming out in its opening weekend. But for superhero films, where you're looking at, say, the Avengers at the top end, which has scored over 200 million in the opening weekend, you're coming down to things like Deadpool, which is in the hundreds of millions in the opening weekend, and even movies like Fantastic Four, which are universally panned by critics as one of the worst films to come out in recent couple of years, has still made the sort of the $50 to $60 million. So when we're looking at $80 million, we're looking at not a very good win for this movie. And I think it's put it down to those concerns that I spoke about earlier. Here's my problem though. The problem is that it has been panned by the critics. People have gone on YouTube before the movie's come out and have said people said it's not very good, so they don't go out to see it. My problem is that I went out to see it with my mate. We actually thought it was really good. Yes, the movie does not have as much depth, does not have as much detail or character or backstory as Days of Future Past or First Class, which were both excellent films. But as a film, to be entertaining and to give us a story which is worthwhile paying to the price of a movie ticket to see, the answer is yes, it is definitely worth it. It is a very, very good film. Well produced, well photographed, well acted, with a couple of exceptions, and the story is reasonably good. The motivations for characters is not really well known. Characters are there just to be characters, scenes are there just to be scenes. Plot is there just to make a movie look good, but in terms of an entertaining movie that you pay to see a ticket for, they did a great job. All the young characters who are there to portray the older characters that we know so well ever since the first movie came in 2000 do a good job. The guy who plays Scott does a great job. The guy who plays Professor X does a great job. Michael Fassbender playing Magneto, of course, steals the show. His story is both tragic and victorious, and he really drives the movie. Apocalypse himself is very good. He is short. He's shorter than all the people around him, which is a little bit weird. But the way he presents himself, the way he talks, the way he acts, the way he exudes power through what he says and just his minor gestures, Oscar Isaac did a fantastic job at trying to portray that level of power from a small stature type person. And when you add the special effects, incredibly effective at showing that even though he's a short guy, even though he looks a bit purpley and pink, he has incredible power and he's not to be trifled with. There is so much tragedy in this film which gives weight to it, but again, the motivations and the reasons and the backstories behind everyone doing what they do is not well established in the film. Okay, there are definitely three things that I think are wrong with the film that people are panning the most. Number one is Jennifer Lawrence's acting. Apparently she was locked into a contract to do this X-Men film, even though she was reluctant to go ahead with it. When she was in X-Men First Class, she wasn't famous yet, so I have a feeling she was very happy to go through the hours of makeup that was needed in order to turn her into Mystique and to act really well and do all the moves that she needed to do as well. But in this movie, now she's famous. She's a $50 million, $40 million actress in movies now, and she doesn't want to go through hours of makeup just for these roles. So you can see that her face is completely wooden. She doesn't act, she doesn't emote at all in this film. You can see also that apparently one of her agreements of a contract for this film was that, okay, I'll do the movie, but I'm only going to be in the suit 3 times. And that is true. She's only in 3 scenes in which she has the full body suit on. Another 2 scenes she's in, she only has the face makeup on. Number 2. There are inconsistencies with Apocalypse's power. In some scenes, Apocalypse has just the most ultimate power you've ever seen, and he could obviously, in any fight or in any battle, he could absolutely destroy everything and anyone he would need to with the blink of an eye, with the click of a finger. But then there's scenes, particularly in the final scene, where he just decides not to do that, and he gets absolutely slammed from so many directions in so many ways, but he still decides to just let them slam him, and eventually he loses, when he could have just clicked his fingers and the whole thing would have been over. There's scenes like that all through the movie where it's almost like he enjoys losing and having the crap kicked out of him. That part just doesn't make sense. Number 3, the lack of background. What you see are world-threatening events, but unlike a lot of movies that have this type of stuff, this didn't have any background to make you feel like this was world-threatening. It had no looking at the military, looking at any kind of security force, any of the world's reactions. You would have media going off, you'd have all kinds of things going off all over the world, triggered by the events set in this movie, but we don't see any of that. So it feels very, very comic booky and isolated. So apparently the next movie that's come out is another Wolverine film. Apparently it's going to be Hugh Jackman's last Wolverine film. Apparently they're going to make it R-rated, so it's going to be lots of blood and gore, which is making a lot of people happy because in the original comics that's exactly what it should be. He should be extremely brutal and gory and awesome. And apparently Deadpool is also going to make an appearance in that movie, if not be one of the actual stars of the movie, so that's very exciting. But other than that, we don't know where it's going to go now. We don't know if there's going to be another 3 X-Men films. I think there will be. Jennifer Lawrence, I definitely think is gone unless she decides that she needs it for her career, which I doubt. And of course you've got the girl from Game of Thrones who's playing Jean Grey, and of course she's a big star now, so she's got to be in the next few films, and she'll probably be the star of the next few films just because of her fame. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Crap day. Aww.